Welcome to episode 245 of Angela Watson's Truth for Teachers. I'm your host, Angela Watson, and I'm here to speak life, encouragement, and truth into the minds and hearts of educators and get you energized for the week ahead. Today, I'm kicking off season 15 of the podcast with an update on my sabbatical and a look at what's ahead for Truth for Teachers. Visit truthforteachers.com to get an easy-to-read, easy-to-share version of this podcast episode. Teachers, I know you're juggling a lot of plates this year. Every Teacher Every Day wants to make the juggling smoother for teachers with its new website available at zero cost. With a searchable database of free lesson plans and resources, Every Teacher Every Day provides a diverse community of wise and witty educators to engage with. I love the idea behind this website. It's practical with heart and humor, and it's totally free. Join the community now by going to everyteachereveryday.org/Truth for Teachers. That's everyteachereveryday.org/Truth for Teachers. This podcast is also sponsored by BetterHelp. If you've been wanting to work through an issue that's keeping you unhappy or preventing you from reaching your goals, but you're worried about the hassle of finding a good therapist, BetterHelp can assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist in less than 48 hours. BetterHelp is professional therapy done securely online. It's available for folks worldwide with timely and thoughtful responses to messages that you can send to your therapist anytime. Plus, you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions. It's easy and free to change therapists if needed, and it's more affordable than traditional offline therapy. Financial aid is available. Go to betterhelp.com/Truth for Teachers to sign up. You can also check out the testimonials there. That's BetterHelp.com/Truth for Teachers. You'll get 10% off your first month at BetterHelp with our promo code Truth for Teachers. Hey everyone, so happy 2022. I am so glad to be back on this podcast, and I wanted to kick off our new season by just giving you an update about what I've been up to and what I have planned for you in the coming year. So if you're new here, this episode is not our normal vibe. This episode is very much more Angela-centered, and our regular eps are centered on you and resources and ideas for your life and teaching practice. I just like to do some personal updates every now and then, so you'll get to hear what my sabbatical was like, what I'm working on in 2022, and what topics we'll be covering on the podcast this season. So as listeners of the show know, I now take a sabbatical every December, and that sabbatical is from the internet. I don't create any new content. I don't post on social media at all during that time. And this is an annual tradition that I unwittingly started in 2020 because I was really grappling with burnout, depression, and anxiety. Frankly, at that time, I didn't have much of a choice from a mental health perspective other than to take a break and step back. My sabbatical in 2021 was much different. I had the sabbatical planned for an entire year, so I was really looking forward to it, and I was able to plan accordingly. I went into the sabbatical feeling really good. Just in general, 2021 was a better year for me than 2020 in terms of mental health and productivity and motivation. So this year's sabbatical was less of a, well, I'm in a state of burnout and I have to step away, than something to just give me space from thinking about all things work-related and come back with even more creativity and inspiration. So the month of December 2021 for me during my sabbatical turned out to not be particularly restful. So we found mold in our home in Pennsylvania. So it was not a big deal. It was in the crawl space and in the garage. It was not in our actual living space, but there was just a lot of contractor stuff to deal with. And we also sold the condo that we had in Fort Lauderdale. I used to live and teach in South Florida before I got married and I moved back up north. So this was the right time in the market to let that place go, to finally sell it off. So I also made a trip to Florida in December and packed and cleaned the condo, dealt with all the real estate and financial and tax stuff and so on. So again, good stuff, but not particularly restful. And my husband and I spent the entire week of Christmas in Virginia celebrating with my extended family. So that was really nice. We got to be with my parents, my cousins, and their kids, and time with my 93-year-old grandmother for a whole week. And to just be fully present with her was awesome, especially since right after we came home on New Year's Day, she fell and she broke her hip. So now that's a whole nother set of challenges in terms of caring for her and being there for her. So there's been a lot to process and handle with all of that as well. So my December involved dealing with a lot of practical stuff, and it wasn't this true time of rest or anything like that. But it was so good to just be totally present in everything that was happening. And I'm particularly grateful that we had that week with my grandmother at her house, because it's not clear at this point when or even if she would get to leave the assisted living facility. So our time with her will look different for a while. And I'm just so grateful that I spent that week tuning out the whole world, everything happening in the news, everything on social media, and just being with her and with my family. And that's what I really wanted from my sabbatical, was a chance just to focus on other things happening in my life besides work. And if you chose to take a sabbatical over your winter break, that's what I really wanted for you too. I know people have lots of things going on, and this blissful time of just, getting to do whatever you want to do and having all this free time isn't the reality for a lot of people. But maybe you just got a break from thinking about school, and that counts for a lot. I found it so refreshing to wake up in the morning and focus on what was happening in my actual home with the people around me, rather than thinking, I need to check email. I need to get back to that person. I've got that meeting scheduled this afternoon, so I have to work everything around that. And I hope you were able to experience a break like that too. So whether you took a sabbatical over your time off in December and it was wonderful, or you took a little sabbatical and it wasn't quite what you were picturing, or maybe you weren't able to take a true break from work over the holidays at all this year, I want to emphasize the fact that a sabbatical can be a really loose concept if you want it to be. I heard from one teacher who said that she had wanted an entire month-long sabbatical like I did. So she decided to do 2 weeks in December, and then she's going to do 2 weeks in the summer. And I love that for a teacher schedule. I mean, it's still a full month, but getting to have something to look forward to twice a year, getting a 2-week sabbatical twice a year, that's an amazing plan. Another teacher who told me about her sabbatical said that she decided she was going to do 5 consecutive days each quarter, with a slightly longer sabbatical over the winter holidays and then 2 full weeks during her summer break. So she's getting a quarterly sabbatical that ranges from 5 to 14 days, depending on how much time she has off from school and what else is going on in her life. So as we are now deep into this current school year, but still not anywhere near the end, when you hit those walls where you feel like you really need a break, I encourage you to continue to look for ways to do that. Maybe on a 3-day weekend, you can take a 2-day sabbatical from work, or even the whole 3 days in which you don't check email, you don't do lesson plans, you don't entertain any thoughts about school at all. I have found that even just protecting my 2-day weekends helps a lot, to stop working on Friday afternoon and to not think about it again until Sunday afternoon. I do like to organize my tasks and make a to-do list and kind of get a feel for what's happening in the week ahead on Sunday afternoons, but you don't have to do that. You can try any approach that works for you. The point is to carry that spirit of sabbatical with you throughout the year. And I think it's especially important when you're experiencing the winter months, as we are right now in the Northern Hemisphere. This is a time when nature has gone silent. Nature is in hibernation, very deep underneath the ground. There's nothing blooming, there's nothing growing really. This time of rest is essential for all the activity that comes later in the year. And I think that our bodies are designed to work with the seasons. Just because it's a new year on the Gregorian calendar does not mean that that aligns with what's happening in nature, and therefore with what our bodies are inclined to do. My body still wants to stay inside by the fire and eat soup. My energy levels pick up in the spring. And if that's the case for you too, go easy on yourself in the winter. Allow a time of more quiet, less running around. Give yourself more time for rest and regeneration in preparation for spring. So January for me has shifted into a time to slowly set plans and goals for the year. I don't have New Year's resolutions in which I try to be a new version of myself or implement all these new habits suddenly on the first. I like to ease in slowly and spend the whole month mapping out what I'd like to be doing with my time. I like to block off periods of non-work and rest into my calendar for the year. I want to consider when I'd like to do certain things or go to certain places. So I don't do all of this quickly, and it's not all happening on January 1st. I'm still, at the moment of this recording, in a very rough draft of figuring out what I want 2022 to bring for me and what I want to bring to it. But I can tell you about 2 new resources that I have planned to create for you. I'm going to tell you about that, and then I'm going to give you a sneak peek of the podcast season and new articles and resources that are coming out there. The first major project for 2022 is releasing a second edition of my book, Awakened: Change Your Mindset to Transform Your Teaching. So this was a book about mindset for teachers that I first published in 2010. So it's now 12 years old, if you can believe that. I know a lot of you have read that book and probably cannot believe that much time has passed. Not only has the world changed and education has changed, but I'm a very different person now, and my beliefs and my value systems have shifted a bit since 2010. So I want to update that book, and I want to create an audio version of it, which currently doesn't exist at all. There is no audiobook version of Awakened, and I've had a lot of requests for that. So I partially want to do this because I feel like the book is really powerful, and there's a lot of valuable stuff in there that I want to say. I've also been getting lots of feedback from teachers who are saying, this is a time when I really need these mindset strategies. I'm going back to reread Awakened. So I think it's a very timely book. And that's part of why I want to go ahead and release a second edition of it now that reflects all of the changes that have been happening. But also there is some stuff in Awakened that I just don't stand by anymore. And that's the problem with publishing books, is that if you put stuff out into the world via a book, it's permanent. If I disagree with something or change my mind on something that I've said to you in the podcast or that I've written on my blog, I can take it down, I can edit it, I can make a disclaimer at the beginning. And I can't do that with the book. And I feel like there are some concepts in that book that I don't want anyone to take the wrong way. So for example, I don't want anyone to read Awakened and conclude that the reason they are unhappy as a teacher is because of their mindset. That if they can just think more positive thoughts and everything will be fine. I don't think that's the way the book is written currently, but as I reread it, I see some places where I want to specifically address toxic positivity and the fallacy of believing that we can just think our way out of every negative emotion. I want to address some systemic issues in the book. I want to talk at least a little bit about the mind-body connection and how some of the stress we feel is not necessarily coming from our thoughts, but from trauma that's stored in the body. I definitely have a much more trauma-informed perspective now than I did in 2010. And so I want to talk about some of the things that I've learned about mindset through that lens. And I also want to take out the religious references in the book. They were the primary thing that people complained about when they read Awakened. Now, I was careful to state in the preface of the book what my own perspective was. So before you even got to chapter 1, you knew about my own belief system and where I was coming from. And I also stated up front that I was working very hard to be inclusive of people who were of different faiths. This was not a Christian book. It was not a religious book. And I wanted it to be accessible to people who are agnostic and atheist. But ultimately, there's a whole devotional guide to Awaken for Christian teachers that goes with this book. That is still in print. It is still available. So there is still something specifically for Christian educators. But on the second edition of Awaken, I want to take out the mentions of religion. And without getting too much into it in this episode, I will just say that my perspective on the harm that religious beliefs can create has changed a lot over the last 7 years or so. And I have distanced myself from American evangelicalism as I have watched it become intertwined more and more with politics and power instead of love and service to those in need. So when I identified as a Christian, I was always a progressive Christian. I was always socially progressive. So I don't think taking out my personal faith-based references from Awakened will impact the tone of the book very much. The tone is still really the same. In fact, I think the book draws more on Buddhist teachings than Christianity. And I've been told that by people a couple of times who are familiar with Buddhist ideology or theology. But honestly, I just want to remove all of that, particularly for schools who want to use this book. There's been a number of times over the years when principals have asked which of my books to have their staff read. And I've had to tell them, well, don't buy Awakened, because there are mentions to various religious faiths in there and a few mentions of prayer and some things like that. And it's just not appropriate for a public school to mandate a book like that to teachers if it has religious references, in my personal opinion. I'm just not comfortable with teachers being required to read that. If I take out the religious references, the book becomes immediately accessible to more people. And so that's also part of my goal in creating the second edition. So second edition and audiobook version of Awakened is part of my big projects for 2022. It's just a wider scope of things I've learned over the past 12 years, and I think it's going to be fabulous in audiobook. So looking forward to that. My other big project for 2022 is something that I actually mentioned in spring 2021, but it got pushed back for various reasons. And that is a new type of resource that is a combination of curriculum, as in ready-to-use materials with students, and professional development for the teacher. And the focus of this product line is on time, energy, and attention management. I want teachers to be learning about time management, energy management, attention management, right alongside the kids. I want teachers to be able to understand themselves better and have a shared vocabulary with students around things like focusing on your work. What motivates you personally? What demotivates you? What times of the day, what times of the week are you most productive? All those sorts of things about just being able to focus our time and energy into things that matter. So it's basically like personal development work for kids and adults to do together. Because as I mentioned when I first introduced this idea last spring, I see productivity as a lifelong experiment. Figuring out what energizes you and what de-energizes you and protecting your energy is a lifelong skill. Communicating about what you're feeling and what you need to other people around you in a healthy way, that's a lifelong skill. These are things that will make all of us happier, help us enjoy our lives more, make our relationships with other people better and healthier in our interactions with how we treat people. It will make us more empathetic, more cooperative, more cognizant of what other people are thinking and feeling and experiencing. It will help us to consider different perspectives, more than one story, right? Like more than one thing can be true. I think all of these types of skills will help us be better at whatever types of work we choose to do in our lives. So the big problem that I'm trying to solve here, and you all know I'm always trying to solve big unsolvable problems. That's something that I like to do. That's what I've done with the 40-hour work week. That's what I've done with Awakened about mindset work for teachers. The big unsolvable problem here that I am attempting to solve, at least in part, or at least contribute a possible partial solution to, is the lack of attention and focus, time, and energy that I think almost everyone in our society is feeling. How can we make our world a more humane, compassionate, empathetic place where we're communicating clearly with each other about what we need and setting boundaries, but also looking out for each other? I want to support teachers in living their lives that way and influencing students in that same way. So I'm still in the beginning stages of putting this together, but I intend for it to be a product line, which I will sell on my own site, as well as on Teachers Pay Teachers for people who prefer that platform for one reason or another. People who don't like TPT can just buy it directly from me and download it. I want this to be widely accessible to educators, so I anticipate having some small elements available for $5, $10, $15, and then entire units that cost more than that. And I'll be working with your schools to get the cost covered via purchase order so that you're not paying for these things on your own. I will be gearing these resources primarily toward upper elementary and middle school. And then I hope to have a team of people help me adapt for high school and possibly for early elementary, but I'm honestly not too keen on that idea. There's already so many resources out there for that grade level. And I feel like there's a lot of SEL focus for the younger grades and not so much for the older kids. So I don't want to promise that I'm going to have anything for K2. I know that's going to disappoint some people, but I'm definitely going to start with the older kids because I feel like the need is there more in terms of getting kids motivated to do work, getting their buy-in, getting them to focus their attention, and having the resources to support them in that I think are just much more prevalent for early childhood than they are for older grades. So my plan is to begin putting resources like that out into the world this year. And I have two reasons for it. There's a personal reason and then sort of like a legacy reason. The personal reason for me is that I have to get real about the fact that I spend the majority of my time and energy that I spend on work on things that don't generate income. So I work for myself. I have my own business and all of my income comes from my own brand. It comes from speaking, from coaching, from consulting, from my online courses, from book sales, from my resources on Teachers Pay Teachers, and from podcast sponsorships. And I would say probably 90% of my energy goes into creating more free content. Or at least it's free for you to consume. It's not free for me to create. It costs something for me to create it. I'm actually taking a loss. So for example, the blog post episodes that are written by our Truth for Teachers Writers Collective, we don't have ads on the site and there's no paywall and there's no Patreon. So I make all of their ideas that are so amazing available to everyone for free. I just pay them myself. They're not generating any kind of income for the business. And that's great. Same thing with the podcast. Yes, I have podcast sponsorships, but it takes a lot of time to produce these episodes. And I spend most of my time on making these things that are available for free. It's wonderful. I love it, but I do have bills to pay. And I have folks who want to buy my stuff. They want more from me than just the free stuff that I'm offering, but I'm not creating anything new for them to buy because I'm so busy working on the free stuff. So I am super grateful for all of you out there who support me, who love my work, the folks who love listening to the podcast, who would buy stuff from me, but there's nothing new. You already have all the stuff I've created that you're interested in. So I want to serve those folks better. And it also just makes good financial sense for me to create something new that brings an income rather than always spending my time and energy on things that I'm not directly compensated for, like composing my weekly emails to teachers on my newsletter list. I pay for that. It's like $1,000 a month just to keep that email account running. And it's free to everybody. Or posting on social media, also very time consuming, not income generating. So those of you who have teacher brands or you have side hustles and you maintain social media accounts for them, you know how time and energy consuming that is. Just playing to the algorithm can be exhausting after a while, and it can be a real distraction from things that move the needle forward. So I am unapologetically prioritizing income generating work in 2022. I'm always telling you to stop working endlessly for free. And I also need to sometimes remind myself, yes, Angela, some of the stuff is fun to do. It helps people contribute something. It's great. You do actually need to make something and charge people for it. It's okay to do that. So that's one of the reasons I want to create the time management resources. The other reason, the more legacy-based reason, is because I do like to solve these unsolvable problems. I'm not a person who wants to just create something quick and easy. You know, I feel like there's tons of that out there. Like, how many more worksheets do we need in the world? I don't have anything to contribute to that. I just don't. The space of education, I feel like it's already very noisy and crowded online. And I want to stay focused on something that is unique to my skill set and experiences and passions. And I think this is it. So both this new professional development and curriculum combination on time and attention management, as well as the second edition of Awaken, are underway, and my goal is to release them both in 2022. I am announcing that here to hold myself accountable. Those are my two big work goals for the year. So all of that said about those paid resources, the free stuff this year is still going to be really incredible. The articles that our Truth for Teachers Collective have been writing are phenomenal. If you haven't checked out the new website at truthforteachers.com, run, don't walk. You will find dozens of teachers from all over the country who are sharing their ideas, their truths, their ideas, their resources. It's amazing. So if you missed that announcement, that was my big project for 2021. I wanted to expand my site to include more than just my own voice and to center the experiences and perspectives of practicing classroom teachers. Y'all are the only ones who know what it's like to teach in a pandemic and the pandemic fallout. And y'all are the experts on what kids actually need from our schools right now. So I want your voices front and center on the site. So that's what we've been working on the Truth for Teachers Collective. Their articles are just amazing. And, I really invested in the design, the layout, the usability of this new site. I think it's pretty phenomenal. I really love it. I hope you will utilize it and enjoy the new truthforteachers.com. So some of our upcoming topics in their posts include how to be unbothered as a teacher. In other words, how to just let stuff just roll off your back instead of taking things personally and getting worked up about every problem. There's an article coming up on why you need a to-don't list, a list of things that you are not going to do, and some ways to make that to-don't list concept work for your personality. There's also a very deep and personal article from a teacher who's pushing back against the idea of, quote, learning loss and advocating for community healing in its place. There's an upcoming article on teaching Black History Month during an era of manufactured CRT backlash, and one on how to disrupt white supremacy culture in your classroom by examining expectations around urgency, individualism, conflict avoidance, quantity over quality. So that's some deep stuff. And there's some light post topics too, like how to teach outdoors in the wintertime when it's cold. That one is out right now, as a matter of fact, if you go to truthforteachers.com. So all of these articles on Truth for Teachers these are not even podcast episodes. This is on top of the podcast stuff coming out. So if you want to get notified of when these articles are published, go to truthforteachers.com, sign up at the top of the page. That way you won't miss out on anything. I send one email a week and I'll send you just an encouraging message and let you know about what's new. And finally, let's talk about what's coming up on this podcast. For season 15, which is going to run from now through early May, I believe, I am planning a mix of solo episodes where it's just me talking directly to you and interviews with our Truth for Teachers writers, as we did last season, and possibly some coaching calls with 40-hour Teacher Workweek members as we talk about what's working in time management and what's not. I would also like to interview some of the administrators in our 40-hour leadership program to talk about some of the shifts that they're making at the school level. So if I can get some folks to carve out time on their schedule to come on the podcast to talk about that, I want to do it. If you're listening and you're thinking, oh my gosh, that's me. I've been through one of the 40-hour programs. I want to talk about some of the changes that I made in my practice. Let me know. Please let me know. You can email me at angela@truthforteachers.com. So angela@truthforteachers.com. I would love to talk with you. So this season of the podcast, we are going to be breaking down some teaching practices. So we're going to be talking about how to manage tiered instruction without overwhelm. We're also going to do a podcast episode this season on streamlining lesson planning by making decisions early. So you're going to get a sneak peek into a teacher's planning process from start to finish and how she manages things so that she's not doing so much the night before. There's also going to be an episode on how to create fewer assignments to grade, so that will reduce your grading workload. And we're going to be talking a lot on the podcast this year about the unique behavioral challenges that many teachers are facing with kids this school year. It is no secret that we have a lot of students who are struggling right now, and teachers are exhausted trying to maintain rigorous instruction and accelerate learning while also being empathetic and responsive to what it's been like for kids these last 2.5 years. I know some of you are teaching in places where folks are doing their best to pretend that everything is normal, but my perspective has always been that this is not normal. Our entire world was turned upside down in March 2020, and there is no going back. I don't think we can just try to keep doing what we were doing before, particularly since teachers were overwhelmed and kids were frustrated with school even before the pandemic. But I just can't be the one to keep talking about normal topics and education all the time like it's 2019. I can't do it. Lots of other folks are able to do that. I'm glad for them, because some folks need that. They need that sense of normalcy, and they want to just let's get back to what's true and tested and the core of things. But here on Truth for Teachers, we are going to be doing a little bit of that, but also supporting and validating those of you who feel like We are truly in unprecedented times in education. We have very unique challenges right now, and we need better solutions than what we've been trying so far. So I'm going to have several classroom teachers who are Truth for Teachers writers talk about behavior on the podcast this season. And these guests span different areas of the country. They teach different grade levels. They have very different teaching contexts and personalities. So with each of them, I'm going to explore just a little bit about what they're seeing this year and what's working for them. So one guest is going to explore the root causes of why so many kids are depressed and seemingly unmotivated right now. And we're going to go very, very deep on that because I think the causes are very deep and we need to really look at systemic and institutional failures that have led kids to the state of mind that they're in right now. It's way too easy to just blame it on parents or blame it on TikTok. There's so much more going on. So we're going to do a deep dive on that. We're also going to be talking with a guest about how to combat empathy fatigue. So, you want to be caring for your kids and you want to, show them grace and all those kinds of things, but there's limits to that. How do you deal with, when you hit the end of your rope and you're like, I don't have anything else to give. And I also have a guest who's going to be giving you practical strategies for supporting kids while also maintaining high expectations and keeping everyone moving forward. And I'm going to run that in the spring because I feel like the end of the school year is always really challenging in terms of student behavior and motivation. And who knows what we're up for this year. So she's going to talk about, I have not recorded it with her yet because I want her to talk about what's actually happening in her classroom, sort of in real time, what's working, and how she's, one of her philosophies is grace and consequences. So we're going to be talking about what that looks like for her in the spring. So all of these episodes are coming directly from other folks like you who are in the classroom living this out day by day. And the conversations that they have with me on the podcast are going to be honest. We will be transparent. We will be direct and compassionate. We are not here to pit teachers against parents and kids. We want to center the well-being of all stakeholders, and that includes you as the educator because your needs matter too. We're not just doing whatever it takes for kids. Your needs matter. We have to find the overlap between what's best for kids and what's for teachers. So that's a little bit of a sneak peek into what's to come in 2022. We've got more great stuff from Truth for Teachers. Just go to truthforteachers.com to get on my email list. And then you won't miss anything. I generally message just one time a week. I usually message only on Sunday nights. So use your best email address. I'm not going to spam and overwhelm you with tons of junk. I will tell you about the new articles that are out from our Writers Collective. I'll let you know about new podcast episodes and some behind the scenes stuff for that. And I will send you messages of encouragement and validation that I don't publish anywhere else. They're just sent via email. So you can sign up for the weekly free email message at the top of truthforteachers.com. Go there and you can check out some of the articles from our Writers Collective while you're on the site. So thank you for indulging me in this very Angela-centered episode. We are getting back into resources and ideas for you, starting with the next episode. Have a wonderful week. You can do this. And remember, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be worth it.